Imagination and words are the tools that man uses to function in life. Is it really possible to achieve an attention so constant and alert that one can always see the fine line between the necessary use of thought and where images lead to illusion and conflict? I hope this question is not too intellectual and is applicable to our life. Imagination and words are the tools that man uses to function in daily life. Is it really possible to achieve an attention so constant and alert that one can always see the fine line between the necessary use of thought and where images lead to illusion and conflict? Why does one create images? About others, about oneself, have images about others and about oneself, and images that we worship, the symbols that we think are sacred, the whole network of philosophical construction of words, ideas, and ideals, and so on. Why do we always create images? I don't know if one realizes that what important part images have played in our lives. The temples are filled with them, the churches, the mosques. In the Islamic world, the mosque has no images, but beautiful writing, which is a symbol of the same thing. So why does man create images? Either by the hand or by the mind, by the brain. And the questioner wants to know, is it really possible to achieve an attention so constant and alert that one can always see the fine line between the necessary use of thought and where images lead to illusion and conflict? Do we understand the question? I'm not quite sure I understand it myself. I'm glad such a question is put. See, we always use words to communicate. There are many means of communication to each other, through words, through a gesture, through a look, through a slight movement of the head. There's always this communication going on, either through words and so on. And words have played an extraordinary part in our lives. First of all, Is there thought without words, without images, without constructing symbols? Is there a thought without words and so on? You understand my question? Or words are part of thought. And if one observes, our whole mode of thinking is a network of words, symbols, ideas. Right? Are we moving together? And what is the division, the questioner asks, between thought, necessary use of thought, necessary use of knowledge, skill, born of knowledge, and the line between that and the image making that leads to various forms of illusions and conflict. Are we understanding the question together? Question seems rather difficult indeed. Are we asking where is the line between thought and the action of images, symbols? Are we asking what part imagination plays in life? Is not imagination necessary? The questioner, I'm investigating the question. Is not the capacity to imagine the beauty of the hills as a painter, as a poet, with their extraordinary capacity to imagine and put into words, or the painter and so on, is not imagination necessary? And does imagination play a part in our daily life? And if it does, is that imagination put together by thought a tool which we can use skillfully? You're following me, right? Is it too cold? All right. A poet, a writer, a painter, a sculptor, and so on, they must have imagination, otherwise they can't write it. But is imagination necessary in our life, daily life? Or imagination prevents, or fancy prevents the actual perception of what is going on? You understand? is it not more important that to understand what actually is going on in our daily life, without all the imaginative, idealistic suppositions, ifs and whens, actually observe what is going on? Isn't that far more important than having great imagination? If one can observe attentively what is going on, then that very attention throws a light of what is, right? Throws a light on what is. And that light of attention clarifies the problem, right? Are we thinking together about this? Reasoning together. Not accepting what the speaker says, but actually reasoning together to see what place is imagination and where that imagination brings about illusion, which prevents actual understanding of what is. Is this clear? I am afraid, suppose, and I imagine a state of mind when there is no fear. That imagination, it becomes very important for me, because it offers an escape from actual fear. I live in that. Living in that imagination is an illusion, not actual. And that capacity to imagine some state of mind or heart when there is absolutely no fear, it gives me a certain sense of vitality, certain neurosis, certain fanciful way of living, which is not actual. So perhaps such imagination prevents me from looking directly at fear and looking at it with complete attention reveals the whole nature of fear. And from that understanding of that attention, fear begins to disappear. But if I have imagination about a state of mind, a state of heart where there is absolutely delightful state, where there is no fear, I'm a bit loony. So, imagination has certain value for the poets, for the artists. But art means to place everything in the right place. That's the true meaning of that word, art. To put everything in its proper place. But the poets, the painters, and the artists lead a pretty hectic life, a life of conflict, that goes on with those artists, great and the so-called artists. So we are concerned with life in our daily life. And the question I ask, is it really possible to achieve an attention so constant and alert that one can always see the fine line between the necessary use of thought and where images lead to illusion. You understand now the question? Right? Do you understand the question? Where to draw the line between the necessary use of thought and where images lead to conflict and illusion. And is it possible to sustain a constant state of attention or alertness where thought has its place, which is skill, born of knowledge as a carpenter, plumber, scientist, and a state of mind that is constantly in total attention? That's the question, right? So we have to inquire what it is to be aware. We'll go into it slowly and come to the point what it means to be completely attentive. Are we ever aware not only what is going on in the world, but also what is going on inwardly? Aware. That is, are we aware as we sit here of the trees, the nature of the limbs, the boughs, the beauty of it, and we are aware of the hills, the mountains, the slopes, all that, and that's perhaps fairly easy. But are we also aware of what is going on inwardly? Our thoughts, our feelings, our peculiar attitude towards life, convictions, and if we are aware, can we be aware without any choice? Are we following each other? To look, to observe without any choice. Right? Is that possible? It is possible only when we understand how choice has become very important in life. Choice of profession, choice of jobs, choice, so-called women, man, choosing. Choice of so many things. You choose between this material and that material. So choice plays a great part in our life. Right? That's clear, obviously. A better tailor, better shirt, you follow the whole business of it. Choice is, at certain level, is necessary between a good car and a bad car. But when there is choice psychologically, inwardly, does it not indicate confusion? Please look at it for a moment. If there is clarity, there's no choice. Right? I wonder if you see that. It's only when we are confused, uncertain, we begin to choose. Right? Isn't this logical? But is it very difficult to be clear? clarity, not about politics and politicians and all that business, but inwardly, to be so absolutely clear. So that your action is never born out of confusion, out of choice. Is that at all possible? And we are saying that's only possible when thought finds its own right place. Right? Are you following all this? Right place in the sense, I must know how to drive a car. Knowledge is necessary in order to speak English, French, or Spanish, or Italian. Or if there is to be a career, I must have knowledge about it. There, knowledge is absolutely necessary. And psychologically, we feel knowledge is also necessary. To know somebody, to know your wife or your husband, to know. So, can you know ever about your wife or your husband? You cannot know a living thing. Right? I wonder if you understand all this. So, psychologically, when we say I must know myself, please understand this a bit. When we say I must know myself, one means by it, I must accumulate knowledge about myself, right? Which is the same as the other, right? To become a good carpenter, I prefer to be a carpenter than a professional scientist and big shots. To be a good carpenter, I must know a great deal about wood, tools, and so on. And I carry the same mentality when I say I must know myself, which means I must gather a lot of information about myself. Right? I'm following? So that I can act rightly or skillfully or whatever it is. So, can I know myself ever completely according to knowledge? You follow this? Or myself is so subtle, so constantly changing, moving, active. It's never the same, right? But I would like it to be always the same. I wonder if you're following all this. So I create an image about myself which is static, and I act according to that. So knowing oneself is not accumulating knowledge about oneself, but to be aware of what is happening with all complete attention, so that there is no accumulation of knowledge about myself, but the movement of myself. You understand? Are we understanding each other? I want to know myself, which is very important. The ancient Greeks talked about it. Ancient Hindus also went into it. The Buddhists. But the religious world of Western world hasn't gone into this question of know yourself. They've talked about it, but they haven't gone very deeply into it. Now, we've tried to know about ourselves according to some philosophers, some analysts, psychologists, and so on. So we are learning about ourselves from others, whereas the others are ourselves. You understand? I wonder if you see this. Vous avez compris? Bien? So, to know myself, I can only observe it in my relationship to another. There I perceive all my reactions, right? All my desires, all my conflicts, I perceive it there. Relationship acts as a mirror in which I see myself actually as I am. If we make that mirror a thing which becomes merely imagery, then it leads to illusion. So, can one be aware of oneself without any choice, and that awareness moves into attention when there is no border, when there is no limited perception, me watching. You understand all this? Has one ever given attention, complete attention to anything? Now, are you now listening to this speaker, Puchab, are you giving complete attention to what you are hearing? And if you so give your complete attention, which means you hear the word, you understand the fullness of meaning of that word, and the word is not important, but the meaning and the content of the word, and giving your complete attention with your nerves, with your ears, with your eyes, with all your energy, then you will see, if you do, there is no me attending. There is no center from which you are attending. Only there is attention. Have you understand? So, it's only, there can be constant alertness and attention when one has really understood very, very deeply the nature of thought, which we have explained a dozen times. Sorry to have taken half an hour of this.